So it's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this our Cabinet meeting on Tuesday, the 4th of February. We've got quite a bit to get through, and unfortunately, both the Chief Executive and I have got to leave at about 3, just for about 20 minutes to attend an urgent meeting. So what we're going to plan to do is to run through all of the non-financial items up until about 3, and hopefully we'll get through all of those until that point, then have a break for half an hour, come back at 3, and then cover the financial items at that point, if that's okay. Let me check whether there are any declarations of interest amongst everybody. And I'm trying to buy time while I look at my notes. So apologies for absence. We all appear to be here. Oh, sorry. Oh, I think we started it. Yeah, we are. So yes, no, we are broadcasting. Apologies for absence. No apologies, Mary.
Just from Councillor Withers, the HASC chairman, who is unable to attend as standing observer.
Super, thanks. And welcome to Councillor Latham, the chair of the Regulatory Committee, who's here this afternoon as well to follow our proceedings. Any declarations of interest, everybody? No. Minutes of the previous meeting, they're on pages 5 to 14. There were 2 previous meetings that we're covering in these, the 10th of December 2024 and the 10th of January 2025, the 10th of January being our special meeting to agree our submission for the Devolution Priority Programme. I propose that these are accepted. Can I confirm everyone's happy? Agreed. Thank you. Do we have any deputations? I don't think there are any. No. So my announcements, let me tell you what the first thing on my announcement list is update on devolution, reorganisation and May election. I wish I had one, I don't. And so we are still waiting for confirmation from the government as to their proposals. We are still, though, preparing for the fact that we will need to consider local government reorganisation, and my thanks to the various leaders and chief executives of both the district and borough councils and our unitary neighbours who have continued to work well and positively in preparing for the preparation of proposals that we need to put forward later this year. A few other quick items to tell you about. The Adult Social Care Commission. Last month the government announced that an independent commission into adult social care will begin work from April under the chairmanship of Baroness Louise Casey. The Commission's first phase, reporting in 2026, will identify the critical issues facing adult social care and set out recommendations for reform and improvement in the medium term. The Commission's second phase, reporting by 2028, will make longer-term recommendations for the transformation of adult social care. Clearly, it's a huge issue for us in respect of our being able to cover the cost and the rising cost of that we face, and so we welcome that report as soon as we can. As you know, I always like to highlight some of the good work that we're doing. And so in terms of the Household Support Fund, the extension of the government's Household Support Fund until the 31st of March means that additional support is available for low-income families and households who are struggling financially. Although the extension came at late notice, the project team has worked at pace to ensure that eligible households can receive support with food, energy bills and assistance with essential household items. By the 31st of December, almost 3/4 of Hampshire's £7.1 million in our fund had been distributed, both through direct support as well as in partnership with other local organisations and our district and borough councils. We look forward to confirmation of future household support funding and the delivery arrangements from April going on. The team do a great job in distributing this, and I know that it's an important lifeline for many, so let's hope that the government confirm that soon. We've also been looking at person-centred planning approaches for Hampshire education staff, Person-centred planning approaches are fundamental to inclusive practice in our schools. They ensure collaboration between staff, families and children and reduce demand for specialist settings, such as independent non-maintained special schools, which are more expensive and often require longer travel for children and young people. Hampshire Educational Psychology has adopted person-centred approaches for a few years and has now been able to share this knowledge through training with education staff across Hampshire. To date, over 200 staff have been trained in person-centred planning and are able to use this knowledge in other meetings they have with families. We have plans to train 20 post-16 providers and another 100 staff from education settings and up to 30 coordinators of SEND provision over the first 2 terms of 2025. The bus service improvement plan, the County Council received 13 million, that's 13 million in the next round of bus service improvement plan funding for 25-26. This will enable us to build on previous BSIP projects that have delivered significant improvements to bus services across many parts of Hampshire, where we've worked together with bus operators to enable the commercial viability of routes. This has included ensuring more frequent services on our busier routes, more real-time information screens, improved bus shelters across all of our districts and boroughs, and more accessible bus stops and demand-responsive transport pilot scheme in Andover. The BSIP partnership has drawn in additional private sector bus operator investment in new fleets of buses in places such as Eastleigh, with many more new buses due to come online in 2025. The BSIP strategy for the next financial year will be coming to our decision day in 2050 in March, where we will be able to talk in more detail about the strategic allocation of funding. It's important to note that this is for schemes in particular where we are encouraging bus services that to become sustainable and looking at ways by which we can advance fund some of that. An update on the Ukraine scheme in Hampshire. As of today, Ukrainian nationals with permission to live in the UK via the Homes for Ukraine scheme and other Ukraine visa schemes can apply to extend their residency for a further 18 months. Links to the information on how to apply can be found on the Gov.uk web pages. In 20 days' time, it'll be the 3rd anniversary of the conflict in Ukraine. As this date approaches, the situation remains tense with ongoing hostilities and significant humanitarian challenges. The County Council, our district councils and local partners continue to welcome and support Ukrainians who have settled in Hampshire. Since the conflict began, Hampshire has welcomed 3,745 guests in the Homes for Ukraine scheme. Most have now moved from their initial host arrangements, but we still have 733 guests living with 506 host households in the county. I'd once again like to extend my sincere thanks to all of our residents who generously made their homes available to host families from Ukraine at any point in the last 3 years. And I'm pleased that we'll be able to continue to offer the thank you payments of £500 per month to host households until March of next year, 2026. These payments are covered by funding from central government to deliver the Ukraine schemes locally. You'll remember at our full council meeting back in November, we passed a resolution in respect to the changes to agricultural property relief. I can confirm that we've written to the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs to call on the government to stop the proposed changes to agricultural property relief. I know most of you around this table have signed the National Farmers Union petition on the issue, and there was also an action for the lead member for Universal Services to engage with local farmers and community representatives to determine what action the council can take to support them. And I know that Councillor North has been active in undertaking that as well. Finally, in respect of the issues that we had with Southern Water just before Christmas, you'll remember that there was a significant water outage for much of the area from the waterside around to Eastleigh, including the southern part of Test Valley at that time. So many residents and businesses were affected by the disruption of the water supply. Coincidentally, we'd arranged a meeting with Southern Water's chief executive and senior managers for the second day of that outage on the 19th of December. So the timing meant that I and other council leaders and local MPs were able to hold Southern Water to account for their response. Naturally, we understand that problems do occur from time to time, but we made it clear that we would expect Southern Water to have better planning for situations like this better communications and greater engagement with local communities and local councils to enable us to help with the response. We're meeting with Southern Water again on Friday. Look forward to receiving their update on their findings from the incident and the proposals they have to address the concerns that were raised in our meeting on the 19th of December. I also know that there are still a number of people who are awaiting compensation from Southern Water for the water outage who suffered water loss, and I'll be taking that up with them then as well. The South Central Strategic Defence Cluster we've led the formation of a new South Central Regional Defence and Security Cluster as part of our responsibilities under the Hampshire Prosperity Partnership Board. It's a regional partnership covering Hampshire, Berkshire, the Isle of Wight, Surrey and West Sussex. It will seek to raise the profile of South Central England's capabilities in defence and security and attract national and international investment and innovation in our region. It involves collaboration between the Ministry of Defence, the Defence and Security Accelerator, the Armed Forces, businesses including Airbus Defence and Space and Kinetic, further and higher education institutions and local authorities. In the coming months, the Defence and Security Cluster will focus on building its membership base and organising events aimed at increasing the level of Ministry of Defence innovation funding in the region. We already have over 250 members of that, which is great news. If you are in a business that is interested in joining the cluster, then do please get in touch with the County Council's Economic Development team. And finally, thanks to the Universities of Portsmouth and Solent, who have allowed we as a Cabinet to go and meet with them and look at ways by which we can engage with them better to work on their various innovative schemes. In the last few weeks, we've enjoyed our visits to you, and hopefully there are many benefits for both their students and the County Council that we can deliver as a result of those. That's it of my announcements. So without further ado, we've got item 6 on the agenda, which is the annual report of the Director of Public Health 24-25, Simon.
Many thanks, Leader. I'm really proud to present my independent annual report to the Cabinet. As you recall, I have the privilege of writing a report on a health issue relevant to the county, and I've chosen this year to focus on the issue of tobacco and smoking. The report looks back over the last 70 years of where we've come from since the first report, but also really is about raising the profile, continuing to raise the profile of the importance of tobacco and the impact on health. It's still the biggest cause of ill health that we have that we can work on together. The report also really thinks about addiction and the fact that actually people who smoke mostly want to give up. And I saw an article in the newspaper, people don't give up in the best way, so they then tend not to be successful. And the report is really about championing that with partners to say, let's make smoking history together. And that really builds on your signing of the Smoke-Free Pledge, which I think was probably about just after you became leader. Really great news, and some of the other work we're doing together alongside the increased investment from the government we've had into smoking. So this report is just championing that with ourselves and partners, and we're doing a great amount of work, and I'm really proud of that. Thank you very much.
Simon, thank you. And yes, and it's been good to share some of the social media stuff around Smoke-Free Hampshire in the last couple of weeks as well. Questions from anybody? Zoe?
Thank you very much. The report's really interesting, and I just want to draw out, I mean, the slide deck itself has some really interesting statistics and data, the impact of tobacco, which, as you know from the paper 70 years ago, drew the link between smoking and cancer. But some of the impact also goes through wider public health impact, from secondary smoke to tooth decay. So really interesting report. But not only that, you've got case studies in there, which brings it to life, and I think that's what's really important about the report. You mentioned, obviously, the wider impact on our work regarding addiction, and this is part of that work. But you also mentioned a really key word there, which is about working together, and that is when we're looking at making smoking history and changing that culture within our communities. Can you draw out for me what you think the most important actions are as a council and our partners that we could do working together to make smoking history?
So I think there's a number of things we do and continue to do. So with the new investment, we've been able to invest in our smoking cessation services and expanding that to include a vape quit service and for young people. So doing an awful lot in that space. We are working with people like Direct Adult Services to really see how we can support clients who may find it harder to give up to take that opportunity. Also using this to really challenge our NHS colleagues. Actually, I think we can do much more in the NHS. We know a number of people go to hospital who are smokers, yet actually the way they're offered support doesn't work because it's just kind of almost a little bit too casual. So we're really championing that as well. Working very closely with people like Trading Standards on vapes, underage sales. So it's going to have a whole systems approach, which is working really, really well. And I'm really pleased that we can kind of work on the back of some of the new money to champion the work that we do in Hampshire.
Lulu.
Thank you, and thank you, Simon, for this report. As an ex-smoker of over 33 years, I know exactly how difficult it is to give it up, so I'm delighted to see this piece of work going forward. However, my main concern is the effect of vaping in young people, mainly because we don't know as yet what the long-term effects are going to be. The Action on Smoking Health, or ASH, well called, Smoke-Free GB Youth Survey analysis is based on data concerning young people aged 11 to 18 and is carried out in the spring each year. In 24, the 18% of 11 to 17-year-olds have tried vaping, and this amounts to about 980,000 children. That's a lot, isn't it? While the rates of vaping among 11 to 17-year-olds appears to have stabilised after a period of increase, the exposure to vape promotion remains high, and I think this has increased quite a bit. And the main sources, obviously shops and also online. So my question to you is, what more can be done to address the trend of youth vaping in Hampshire? Thank you.
You highlight some real challenges there, and we have seen a huge increase in vaping. So first of all, my message is if you don't smoke, don't vape, and we're very clear about that. We are seeing the legislation going through government which will really help that. So the banning of single-use vapes, which are obviously more attractive to young people because they're cheap, and also the loophole that children can be given a vape rather than, they can't be sold it, but they can be promoted. So that's all going to help us, and the change in advertising is really, really positive in that space. For us, it's about how we enable people to give up vapes. We are supporting our schools as well because they're dealing with that on a daily basis in some really challenging situations, because you find that people are kind of hiding away and vaping in toilets. So how do we support schools to have those conversations? And we're working across that with colleagues like Stuart and his team to really enable the schools to get the right information out and sharing that with parents. We've done, so some notes here, we've got some e-learning modules so that people know how to raise the issue of vaping. And I was really interested when we sent some information out, the feedback we got is the best advice you've given is how to talk about smoking. And I thought, well, that's really, they didn't want the facts, they didn't know how to talk about it. So we're really helping people in that space. And then working with Trading Standards to make sure that actually the vape shops are doing what they should do, as in quite rightly they can sell to adults, but we need to kind of keep that in place. So it's, again, a system approach. And as I say, I'm really proud of our Quit Vaping service, which is one of the most innovative in the country, because we know that that's almost become a different addiction. So lots we can do together that Councillor Oppenheimer and Councillor Fairhurst are championing in their roles of public health leads.
You learn something new every day. And as the chief confiscator of vapes in our family, I approve entirely of the work. Russell, did you want to say a few words about this one?
Thanks very much, Chairman. And can I start by thanking you, Simon, for this report? You know, every year when you present your annual report, I'm always struck by how you manage to choose your subject so well, because it always strikes a particularly apposite note, and you've done that again this year because it's very timely. It's a good moment with the extra funding and with our new contractor coming in to just highlight to people that support is available to stop smoking. I think actually there's a wonderful quote in your report from Barry, and he says, "I sleep better, my chest is clearer, and I have more energy and money since quitting." I don't think I can improve on that as a testimonial for why people should think about quitting. But I know from my experience, like Councillor Bowman, I smoked once, and I know it's difficult because it's a physical addiction to the nicotine as well as a mental and behavioural addiction. But the support is there, and I think with our new contractor, we're gonna be able to provide tailored support to people. So I really hope people will get in touch. One of the reasons I think this is such an important subject is because it's so relevant to the health inequalities we have in Hampshire. We know that in Hampshire, we've got these terrible health inequalities where some of our communities are able to be in good health and some are not. And smoking really speaks to that, because in parts of Hampshire, smoking is, the rates of smoking are as high as 19%, whereas in other parts of Hampshire, it's as low as 7%. It would be great to get everyone right down to below 5%. And we're here to help people if they want to make that step. So thanks for the chance to say that.
Okay. Any other comments, everybody? No. So, Simon, thank you so much. The recommendations are on page 15. Can I confirm that you're happy to support that report? Great. Okay, Simon, thank you so much. So, Audit Committee terms of reference. David.
Thank you, Leader. It's a fairly technical report. It's been to the Audit Committee first. It's coming here on its way to full council. We have basically expanded upon our existing terms of reference by making them more explicit to follow some guidance that's been issued by CIPFA. There are a couple of things I'll particularly point out, though, to Cabinet, is that the proposal is to appoint 2 independent co-opted members to the Audit Committee, which is a new thing for us. And we've also slightly changed it so that no member of the executive can be a member of the Audit Committee, rather than previously we said they couldn't be the chairman or the vice chairman. And that's really designed just to promote the independence of the Audit Committee so it can fulfil its function. But other than that, I think the report's fairly self-explanatory, so happy to take any questions.
Thanks. And I think it's a good move that nobody from the executive is there, because it should be an entirely independent body from us to be able to do that. Any comments or questions, everybody? No? As you say, it's quite a technical issue. Is it going to be easy to find people to become the independent members? Do we want people to apply?
Well, that is a kind of something we've been considering. We want the right people. What we have done is done some work with the Independent Remuneration Panel, who have agreed an allowance of £2,000 per annum, which will be coming to the full council in due course. So we are hopeful for 4 meetings that will attract the right sort of candidate.
So after full council, contact David if you're interested. The recommendation is on page 37, everybody. Are we happy to support that one? Agreed. Okay, thank you. And David, you've got the next one as well, which is the review of contract standing orders.
Thank you, Chairman. So my colleague Sarah Huckfield is just going to be here just to answer any very technical questions that come up, because she's our legal lead on contracts and procurement. But again, this is a technical report. It's come through the Audit Committee again. We're largely making the changes to respond to the Procurement Act 2023. I think there's one thing I do need to point out, in that there's been a sort of transposition error in the report in terms of the actual recommendation should read that the Cabinet approved the revised contract standing orders set out in Annex 2 for recommendation to the County Council for approval. For some reason that's been omitted, but again, happy to take any questions.
Super, thanks. Welcome, Sarah. So to be clear, we're recommending this for onward approval by the County Council. Steve, I think you've got a question.
I do. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kelly. One of the common queries raised on procurement is with the public sector is the length of carrying out procurements. Will the changes make the process of procurement any quicker or more agile? Will they help?
I think that's certainly the intention. We'll have to suck it and see, because they have simplified some of their procedures, but they've also added in additional kind of reporting procedures, haven't they, on the end of it, Sarah? So our hope is it will, but I can't give you any guarantees. Do you want anything to add?
Thank you. No, I was just going to add that the new legislation introduces a great more deal of flexibility, so that may streamline some processes. However, as David just mentioned, there is a great deal more transparency on us now. So there are a large number of now additional reporting requirements, which shouldn't delay anything. However, there are additional steps that and obligations will now be subject to.
Does that eventually get reported somewhere once it's underway? Presumably we have to produce then an annual report of some kind for people to see?
Each procurement will be published as they currently are, depending on the value, and throughout the procurement process, additional notices will be published to alert the market of the any fundamental changes into the procurement, and also at the end of the when the contract's awarded, depending on the value, they'll have a notice there. If the contracts are modified during the lifetime, there'll be a notice. So there's a lot more transparency, and that notice will be going out too.
Super, Sarah. Thanks very much. So, any other comments, questions? No. The recommendation is on page 51. Is everyone happy with that? Agreed? Sarah, David, thank you very much. So we're looking at the corporate complaints policy now, which is Jack.
And I'm bringing Stuart Mott, who's Head of Organisational Resilience. So hopefully this is as straightforward as everything else. Excuse the glasses swap. I have to choose between seeing my papers or seeing you.
I'd choose the papers if I were you.
So the report's been to Select Committee, Hampshire 2050 Corporate Resources, Corporate Services Select Committee en route to Cabinet. We're seeking agreement on a number of proposed changes to our corporate complaints policy on the back of updated guidance from the local government social care ombudsman and their new complaint handling code, which was introduced in April 24 to be enforced from April 2026. A number of the new recommendations within the code are listed in paragraph 11. I won't read those out, but we're happy to take questions on them. And in addition, the paper also introduces a new unacceptable actions by customers policy, which has already been to the Employment and Hampshire County Council committee in November 24. So this is its kind of final route on its implementation journey.
Jack, thanks very much. So Cabinet, any questions from you? Jan?
Sorry, Jack, a quick question around stage 3. We had 3 stages in the complaints procedure. What is the benefit of removing that stage 3 for our residents and for the organisation as a whole? Thank you.
Thank you. So we actually did a trial of this new process in 2024, whereby we removed this 3rd stage of the process for SEN complaints. Our evaluation of the pilot was that it resulted in better outcomes for both the council, the customer, and it resulted in less LGSCO interventions. So we found it was better for the council because this approach enabled the directorates to make more concise and conclusive response to complaints by removing any potential 3rd stage. It also, this new approach reduced instances of repeated and unnecessary customer complaints, which is in line with our wider initiative to try to reduce the amount of interactions we have with needless interactions we have with customers. We actually found it was better for the customer. So we found that in the pilot, the customers received faster, more comprehensive and more definitive responses, reaching a conclusion more quickly. And then in terms of LGSCO interventions, this approach had less interventions from the LGSCO, with the Ombudsman stating on several cases they were not going to investigate cases because they did not think that they could add to the County Council's stage 2 response. So we found it was better all round.
Thanks. So as you said, it's been through 2050 and an element of it through EHCC. We've got the chairs of both here. Jonathan, anything to add from your chairs, your committee's perspective?
Nothing of significance. It was properly scrutinised by the committee. I think both of you were there, so you would have heard most of the arguments. And it's generally accepted that moving it from 3-stage to 2-stage is a much better way of going about doing the complaint system. And so therefore, that was one of the items that went through very quickly.
Super. Thanks very much. Russell, anything to add from EHCC? Nope. All good. So in which case, Stuart, Jack, thank you very much. We've got your recommendations on pages 93 and 94. Can I check everyone is happy to accept those?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Thanks very much. We all agreed on that one. And so item 10 is the local development scheme. Gary and Laura are going to talk us through the update to that.
Good afternoon, Leader. Good afternoon, Cabinet. Introduce Lauren McCulloch, who's our Head of Spatial Planning, who will help me with any technical or tricky questions. Briefly introduce the report, which is a procedural matter regarding the update of our development scheme for the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. The paper sets out our reasons for updating the local development scheme based on a requirement from MHCLG, which was communicated to us in December 2024. And you'll see in the paper the revised timeline in paragraph 9. So nothing further from me, Leader, on what, as I've said, is essentially a procedural matter, and refer yourself and Cabinet's recommendations in paragraph 2 of the report.
Super, thanks so much. Obviously, this kind of local plan is pretty much at the forefront of our thinking at the moment with the government's revised housing numbers. Questions, anybody from anyone? Kirsty.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, just on that, whilst we have the opportunity, Gary, Laura, once the update to the Minerals and Waste Plan has been adopted, how are we going to deal with the impact of the planning reform and this huge increase of housing numbers brought in by the Labour government across the whole of Hampshire?
Thank you. So we've tried to build as much flexibility into the plan as we can to enable it to deal with peaks and troughs of demand, because obviously we know that the construction industry can be quite flexible in that respect. So we've tried to build that into the plan. However, we have recommended in the LDS that we do a review in early 2027 so that we can just see how it's performing and test whether there's a need for any update or to look at any additional sites.
Super, thanks. Any other questions, everyone? Peter, as Chair of Regulatory, did you want to make any comment on this one?
No, I believe the committee's sitting at the moment as we speak. So anyone who wants to go along is just along the road. And I think they're coming back again on tomorrow as well. So you get an update there as well.
Super, thanks very much. Any comments, everybody? No. So the recommendations for this one are on page 125. It's an update as we go along this long road to approval of the new plan. But Laura and Gary, thank you so much. Is everyone happy to approve that? Agreed? Okay, that's great. In which case, thank you so much. Now, this is the bit then where we are going to have a break, if that's okay, before we get on to all the financial papers while we just go off. So we're a few minutes ahead of where we plan to be, but if we can come back at about 3:10, please, is that okay? So welcome back to our Cabinet meeting, everybody. My apologies, we're a few minutes late, but we have just finished the meeting that we had to pop off and attend. So we're back now to Cabinet, and we're going to be considering the various financial items that we've got in front of us. So this is all going over to Rob to explain to us. And so we start off with the end of November financial update. Rob.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, Cabinet. Just two things to pull out from this report. So the report shows that we're making good progress on implementing SP25 Phase 1 savings, which obviously you approved last year. But I think more important than that, what we've also managed to do is to close down all of the previous savings programmes that were in place. So that significantly de-risks the budget for next year, given that I think when we go back to 23-24, we had 3 separate savings programmes in place, and therefore there's quite a lot of risk associated with delivery of those. So the fact we've managed to close all of those down by the time we get to 25-26 is positive, so we can concentrate on delivering SP25. And then the other thing to pull out was, so despite the continuing pressures that we see through adults and children's services in the usual areas in terms of social care and school transport, we have seen the predicted net overspend reduced from £15 million reported to you last quarter to £6.9 million by the end of the year as a result of the spend control measures that we've put in place. That also includes the £1.4 million one-off cost impact of the mutually agreed resignation scheme, which gives rise to £14 million worth of recurring savings going forward from next year. Happy to take any questions, Leader.
Rob, thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions of Rob? No, I think, no, so Jan, don't look expectantly at me.
Thank you, Leader. Just a quick question. Is there a direct correlation between the spend controls and the reduction in expenditure? Is it a significant kind of closely rated timeline, or is there a lag? And are we sure that the spend controls are what's making that impact and difference?
Yes, good question. So the clever people in finance did an analysis of all the different expenditure types over the first 6 months of the year and looked at average spend per month in various different areas. They've then compared that since we put the spend controls in place, and we can see that the reductions that we've recorded are in the areas that we'd expect to see. So things such as staffing costs because of the recruitment freeze, printing, mileage claims, all of those areas that we've been targeting is where we're seeing the reductions in costs come forward over the rest of the year.
Thank you.
I think it's the credit to it's to the credit of everyone that we have seen that deficit come down through those controls. And in terms of that happening, does that in any way inhibit our ability? It presumably isn't inhibiting our ability to do our day-to-day business and to get in the way of delivering the services that we should.
No, so we've been very careful to make sure it doesn't interfere, but at the same time, with the further spend control boards that we're putting in place, we do need to make it slightly more difficult than it is at the moment. So in some respects, it's that prevention side of things which drives people's behaviour in terms of putting expenditure forward in the first place, rather than the fact that it is then approved at the spend control boards itself, if that makes sense.
Understood. Any other comments, colleagues? No. Select committee chairs? All good? So in which case we're just looking at the recommendations that are on page 139. Are you all happy to accept those?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. That's super. Thanks so much. So the section 25 report from the Chief Financial Officer. Rob.
Thank you, Leader. So this report would normally be part of the budget report that we present each year, but I think given the significance of the budget setting for next year, we decided to pull it out as a separate report. Obviously, Cabinet will be aware already that our request for exceptional financial support was not approved by the government. So we found that out yesterday, which obviously has a significant impact on both this report and the budget report that follows. So I think given that position, I just wanted to highlight a number of the recommendations within the report. So recommendation 7, my conclusion is that reserves are not adequate beyond the 25-26 financial year at a 4.99% council tax increase. Recommendation 8, if council tax is only increased by 4.99% next year, then this increases the likelihood that the council would need to issue a Section 114 notice in advance of the 26-27 financial year. Recommendation 12, since the request for EFS has not been approved, the County Council should trigger a referendum by setting the council tax at 15%, because obviously all of the reasons that we went for the EFS in the first place still apply, and therefore I'm recommending a referendum be triggered. And then finally, recommendation 13, even if Cabinet do not recommend triggering a referendum, then this should still be considered by County Council, given this is effectively the last lever they have to pull for setting the budget and trying to balance it for 25-26. You would appreciate that this advice is being given by me as your CFO purely in the context of the County Council's longer term financial sustainability, but happy to take any questions, Leader.
Thank you very much, Rob. So, colleagues, any questions of Rob as a consequence of his commentary there? Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. That was really clear. Thank you, Rob. And obviously, this is your recommendation for us to know. And I just want to say, you made it very clear there that obviously this was a leverage that would take us forward for a sustainable budget. And I think what we need to understand is your recommendation comes from that of financial stewardship and looking ahead and in advance and raising that in concern, because I know many would ask why we would do this now in 25-26 when actually our financial balanced budget is unlikely in 27-28. So I just want to thank you in your work and just acknowledge that under your financial stewardship.
It's 26-27, is it? Sorry, I do that all the time, but it is 26-27 our next year where we know that we run into a challenge. Rob, I think because clearly people will be watching and wondering why we found ourselves in this position and where we were having to ask for that increase. Two questions. Could you just run us through why we are where we are in terms of having we're pretty much the lowest council tax in the country, and then also why we ended up asking for 15%, because I know our initial ask was slightly different. Do you mind just giving us that history, which I think would be, I know we know, but it would be helpful for people to hear that.
Yes, I think we've been talking for many years now about the increasing costs of social care in particular, but also more recently homeschool transport. And in simple formulaic terms, the amount of increased costs and pressures that we have each year far outstrips our ability to be able to raise council tax, which is our main way of trying to balance the budget. So effectively, for a number of years now, the gap between that increase each year and what we're able to raise through council tax has got higher and higher, to the point that we're running out of options other than making savings in order to balance the budget. As you'll know, as part of the SP25 Phase 1 savings, we weren't able for the first time to generate enough savings to close the budget gap on a recurring basis. So we started looking at the legal minimum service levels, what further savings could we make in order to reduce down our spend to try and get a sustainable budget. We've done that work, and that's part of the papers that you've got before you today. But even in a full year, that still only has created about another £45 million worth of savings. So the conclusion that we were coming to before we did that piece of work, and also we had the independent panel in to help us with that, and the same conclusion that they came to, is that we are unable to balance our budget through savings alone. So that required us to put a request into government for an increase in council tax, which again, the background to that, as you say, we have a very low council tax, having frozen it for 5 years back in the early 2010s. We now think that freezing of council tax effectively lost us over £100 million worth of recurring income if you inflate it forward to the current year. So So what we were asking for is the ability effectively to catch up with the rest of the councils, and the increase of 14.99% would have taken us just above the average still of the county councils, so by no means at the top end of those figures. I think that's answered all your questions.
It has very well. I think it's it's a figure that I repeat very often, but every month we face an additional 30 people who are living in care homes who have used up all of their own resources and therefore need to fall upon us to help pay for their care, for example. And we're running at an average of 200 fresh EHCP applications for children with special educational needs every month. And so that shows the ever-increasing growth that we have in the pressures upon us. And there are very many other examples of that, not least as we see an increase in the number of people who are over 80 in our population that has grown, is due to grow by 10%, by the end of the decade. And whilst each of those people, their longevity is welcomed, they also need our support, and so the cost of that has to be paid for somewhere, which is why, going back to the beginning when we were talking about the Adult Social Care Review, that's so important to everybody in local government as we go forward. Rob, yeah.
Just as we're quoting examples, I think the one that I bring out all the time, if you take home to school transport, in 23-24, when we set the budget was £39.9 million in total. The budget that you'll be setting for 25-26 is 105.9 million in 2 years. That's the growth.
And that's why we've been asking for the ability to both means test certain of the things that of the various services that we offer, and also look at more innovative ways of arranging these. And we are working very hard with both community transport providers and with the bus companies, and indeed Lulu, Councillor Bauman and Kirsty chaired a meeting of those various parties in this room last week to begin to look at new ways of working and different ways by which we can manage it. But that simply doesn't answer the fact that the number of children who are eligible for this support is increasing by potentially 200 a month at the moment. So any further comments, everybody, in addition to that? Jan?
Yeah, just quickly. So are we the second lowest county council tax in England? So what's the percentage differential for average tax rate D between the lowest and the highest? And what sort of percentage? Sorry, that you said you wanted a random question.
Yeah. Preferably one that I could answer. So I think ours is currently 1,533, and I think the highest county council tax must be nearly £2,000. So yeah, so a third extra.
I think we worked out a little while ago that if Hampshire council taxpayers Hampshire County Council taxpayers paid the same amount as Surrey council taxpayers, we would be turning in a surplus against what we do by quite some margin. So that gives you a sense of how the rates differ and how it is the historic level that we've charged, going back many years, decades indeed, that it causes us a problem. So Select Committee Chairs, I think, Rob, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I just had a question for Rob about paragraph 59 on page 18. And I'm just interested in the SIP for guidance on your comments that it's not sensible or sustainable in budget terms, but it is an option open to the council. Is the guidance on effectively borrowing to fund revenue funding, does SIPFA have a view on that, or is that a view that the officers are taking in line with SIPFA guidance? I'm just interested in whether there's any leeway in your view on that, or whether that's a uniform view of professionals in your position. Sorry, I'm on 172, I'm sorry. Note 59, which is talking about the options of borrowing to fund revenue funding. And you make the comment in 59 about, I am very clear, it's neither sensible nor sustainable. I'm just interested in the SIPFA view on that, about whether your advice is absolutely in line with SIPFA guidance or whether there's any leeway on that option.
So I don't think there's specific SIPFA guidance around that. Effectively, what we are doing, if we were to do that, so if we were to borrow to fund the capital programme to release those revenue resources in order to balance the budget, we're effectively giving ourselves our own capitalisation direction. And considering that the government is currently looking at a number of capitalisation directions for other organisations that have asked for it, it clearly is an option that is open to a lot of councils. My point is borrowing to fund your revenue cannot be sustainable, cannot be sensible, and I'm sure if SIPFA were asked a view, that would be their view as well. I think we've said in the past it is literally borrowing in order to fund your daily revenue expenditure of your house, and you wouldn't do it.
My questioning was about the wording, about that first two. One, I am very clear. And that's what I was asking about, whether that was a personal view or whether that was effectively anyone in your position might saying. And I think you've answered that very clearly, so thank you for that.
And I think it is that issue of, what the analogy that I've used of mortgaging the house to pay for the groceries, which you wouldn't do. And I was going to say this when we got to the capital part of the conversation as well. The capital that we hold that we could potentially transfer is also the consequence of the legacy that those that preceded us have built up by way of the various buildings and various land that they have invested in. And that's the legacy for the people of Hampshire, and it is that money that we should be spending to create a legacy for those that succeed us in whatever form they might be, with local government reform coming along. But it is that is the money that we should be spending to create investment which reduces the long-term revenue cost, rather than just using it to, frankly, squander it in trying to bridge our budget gap. Sorry, any other comments? Everybody? No. So we're asked to note a number of the recommendations that are on pages 163 and 164. Are we happy to agree those? Agreed. Thank you. Now, so revenue budget and precept 25-26. We should all have, well, we kind of have a declaration to declare as council taxpayers, but I'll let David explain that part of it for us.
So just to mention, members, that there is a general dispensation for all of you to participate in setting the council tax as council taxpayers. So our general process is that we just take it as read, that you have all made a declaration, and we do the same for the full council.
Super, thank you very much. This is one that's been a moving feast for the last 24 hours, as you might imagine. Rob and I think Marie are going to help us with showing where we've got to with the current recommendations that we have.
Thank you, Leader. Obviously, this is a huge and complex report, so I certainly don't intend to go through it in detail. You'll all be fully aware of the background to it. We've been effectively working on the 25-26 budget for some nearly 2 years now. Obviously, what's slightly different to this budget setting process is it's the first time for quite a few years that we had savings proposals as part of the budget. We've normally done that as a separate exercise. So I'd already mentioned that our request for EFS had not been agreed by the government. But before I go on to consider the council tax position and the impact on that, I just wanted to take the opportunity to update on the final local government finance settlement that was announced yesterday, and also updates that we've had from district councils. And you can see there's a useful table up there, which I'll talk through some of those. So top line there, additional national insurance grant. So as you know, the government said that they would compensate local authorities for the increase in national insurance. Glad to say for once the government listened to us. The original methodology for allocating that grant included housing benefit spend, which in my humble opinion doesn't have much of an impact on the cost of national insurance. So the government have actually removed that as a basis of methodology for allocation for the final position. So that's increased our share by 1.1 million. Whilst that's good news, we still think that is some £1.3 million short of the additional costs that we will have as a result of the national insurance increase. And that doesn't include the potential knock-on impacts of providers trying to pass on their national insurance increases to us through the prices that they charge us. So overall, we're still effectively down on that deal. Government added another, I think it was 15 or 20 million pounds to the Children's Social Care Prevention Grant. So that increase of 236,000 there is our extra share of that. There are grant conditions associated with that, so we expect to have to spend all of that funding on new prevention work. So we've taken that out then of the bottom line forecast for the budget. A few minor increases and changes to revenue support grant, new homes bonus and social care grant. And then overall our net change in the business rate position is about an extra 400,000. So as a result of the settlement, we're nearly £1.7 million better off, which is obviously good. And then in terms of the notification from districts, there was a small reduction in the council tax bases that were notified to us. So that effectively loses us just over £500,000 worth of income. But that's more than compensated by increases in collection fund surplus, which is £2.1 million above the 6 million that we included within the budget papers that you've got before you. So overall, that gives us nearly £3.3 million additional resources as part of the budget, but clearly some of those will be one-off and won't impact on future years. Just to note as well, if I put a note at the bottom there, so the total Children's Social Care Prevention Grant of just over £3 million will need to be added to Children's Services cash limit. So we'll do that as part of the final papers that go to County Council in a couple of weeks' time. As I mentioned, so obviously there are savings proposals within the report. So all of the figures in the report assume that those savings proposals will be agreed by Cabinet and County Council. But just to be clear, if any of those are not taken forward as part of the budget, then effectively we'll need to draw money from the budget bridging reserve in order to compensate for that reduction. Just means that we don't then have to change all of the various council tax figures, etc. as a result of that. So just turning to council tax, already highlighted as part of my section 25 report, that because EFS has not been agreed by the government, my recommendation is that Cabinet and County Council increase the council tax by 15%, thereby triggering a referendum. But clearly that is something for you to consider in making your recommendation to County Council today. So I think I'll leave it there, but happy to answer any questions.
Rob, thank you. So let me check with colleagues. Any questions, Zoe?
Maybe just a clarification. It's been reported in the press, obviously, that the government have announced £69 billion of local government funding, which I think is 6.8% of cash term from last year, or 24-25. On the 3.3 additional resource revenue that we have there, is that what we're seeing from what's been reported of the 69 billion? There is no money effectively, isn't there? And when you talk about national insurance, for example, that is a 1-year settlement that already what is costing us 1.3 million, which possibly may triple, I'm assuming, in the following year. So I just wonder how that's showing within that additional resource that you talked about there.
So I think the reason the government announced the national insurance increase as a 1 year is because obviously it's the final year before they do the comprehensive spending review. So my expectation would be, having given that as a sort of new burden funding, that would feature in future settlements. But obviously we've got no surety over that. In terms of the overall resources that are often quoted by the government, that's usually in relation to core spending power. Which includes everything. So that also includes the assumption that we will increase council tax by the full amount under the referendum limit. So effectively, it's our own money. I think overall, won't include these changes here, but I think our increase in core spending power is about 5.9%. So it's still a reasonable amount, but obviously most of that comes from council tax increase. The other major area would be additional social care grant. That was quite a significant increase as well.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions? Russell?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm proud to live in a county that has services that are rated good or outstanding across the board. And I think council taxpayers can feel proud that their council tax payments enable HCC to look after people who need help. You know, it's always struck me, one of the reasons that HCC has good and outstanding services is we've been able to plan ahead. You know, planning ahead is the first step of any successful project. That's obviously now going to be more difficult because we're in a situation where we can't effectively plan for the 2026 to 27 financial year. But we're going to do our very best to accommodate that challenging environment. You know, the next year is going to be a challenge, but I think we can do it, and we can make sure that when we come back in a year's time, or whoever is here in a year's time, we can have a balanced budget for the following financial year. But that is going to take all of our work over the next 12 months.
Thanks, Zoe.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Indeed, and my question is on a savings programme, and I think that this is all about protecting the vulnerable and obviously offering those services, and we have to make hard decisions to make sure that core purpose remains there within Hampshire and we have quality services. And I think that reassurance is something that we need to give today, although some of the conversations we've had previous to this, we are there for the people of Hampshire. My question is just one line on a savings programme, which is the Solent Sea Rescue Organisation, the SSRO. Obviously, we're putting in a removal of grant funding for them of 49,000, which, just to be clear, is specific to cover insurance payment. I think in all of this, when you remove a grant funding, there is a ripple effect. They will have to find that money from elsewhere. However, I just want to make sure that obviously we are mindful, which I believe we are with the notice period that you've given, because this isn't next year's budget, this is the year after, in 26, 27, that we will have those conversations, being mindful of their financial position, which I believe they have reserves, but mindful in that open dialogue that we go through that exit of that and the possible ripple effect of removing grant funding.
Yeah, thanks. So, as this is a single organisation, we will engage with them to understand the impact of that withdrawal. As you quite rightly said, we've given a year's grace in order for them to be able to put their house in order, to be able to look at other options for savings. But also we are cognizant of the fact they do hold £1.7 million worth of cash reserves between them. And therefore, you know, worst case scenario, they could draw on those in order to fund that expenditure, which from our point of view, the work that we've done around legal minimum, clearly we don't have a statutory responsibility to provide that grant cover for them. So we think we've done what we can in the context of our own financial position, but yes, we will be engaging with them on it.
Any other comments or questions? No. Before I go to the Select Committee chairs, Rob, clearly none of us want to ask people to pay more council tax. And had we been given the freedoms and the additional ability to change the way in which we worked that we've been asking now for a number of years, we wouldn't have needed to do that, but we did. And we did it because we could see that there was a problem coming in 26, 27, and it would be imprudent of us not to be prepared for that. And inevitably, I suppose, in some ways, we are potentially kicking that can down the road just until next year when we will face a very similar situation. That doesn't stop us, and that won't stop us looking for other savings. But when we've been talking about the proposal for council tax, we have asked people in previous consultations recently their view of what they feel would be a reasonable amount of what they'd be prepared to pay. And I think it's fair to say that anything above the referendum limit was quite clearly rejected in all the consultations we've held.
Yes, I think if you go back a number of years, obviously we've held similar consultations on savings proposals on our global position for being able to balance the budget. I think what we've seen is a trend over the years of people less likely to want to pay more council tax in order to prop up council services. That has been a clear direction of travel, and certainly since obviously the cost of living crisis, that has got even worse. So I think if we go back to the consultation we did in summer 2023, it's in the report. I'd need to find it, but I think the number of people wanting to or saying that they would be happy to pay an above 4.99% council tax increase was less than 20%, I think.
Super, thanks. And I think it's fair to say that whenever there has been a referendum elsewhere, and we differ as to whether there have been one or three, different internet searches have found different things. Each has been rejected by their electorates by a margin of at least 2 to 1 in each of those cases. Select committee chairs, do you have any questions or anything that you'd like to add? No. Okay. So before we wrap up, I think we have a fresh set of recommendations in front of us. It's ones that Rob and Andy have very kindly worked on for us in terms of bringing this together. So we have those there. It is quite clear to me that regardless of whether we would or would not be holding elections as a consequence of the devolution programme in May, to hold a referendum will cost us an additional amount of money. We know that people would not be supportive of a council tax increase. Indeed, we're not supportive of a council tax increase unless we were absolutely forced to do so, which is where we are. And so our recommendation that we'll be passing on to the council is that we increase our council tax by the referendum limit, which is 4.995%. 2% of that being specifically ring-fenced for adult social care, although realistically much of it will go into social care in terms of both children's social care, special educational need and adult social care pressures, but that we do not recommend that that a referendum should be held, and that we will, as a consequence of that, look to find further savings as we go forward through the year. In the last decade, this council has already found over £800 million worth of additional savings, and we have made comments throughout the years as to the pressures under which we find ourselves and the various things that we've done to manage our finances in a prudent way and a format in which we prioritise the most vulnerable in our community, because it is those people to whom we are, or for whom we are here to serve. We have taken back all that we do to the core purpose of a council. So we've looked at what we believe the statutory minimum in every service to be, and we have taken ourselves there. And we continue to look to find savings. We have, thanks to the independent panel report, identified a further £20 million worth of savings, which will begin as the core of a transformation programme that we or any successor to this cabinet will take forward over the next year. The different work that Rob has identified by way of the spending controls that have been put in place have been of assistance to us as well, but I have to say that we now need to go back and look at those statutory requirements, and we need to see if our definition of them can enable us to make further savings, and that will mean some further changes to services. It will mean changes to the way in which we do things, and it will mean that we will need to make some very difficult decisions in the months ahead, be it this cabinet or a future one, to make sure that we get the budget gap that currently stands at an estimated 180 million for 26-27 down to an amount as much as we can. I completely concur with Rob's view that we should not be using our capital reserves for bridging our revenue challenges. Even if the county is not to survive in its current form, then it would be entirely wrong of us to just shrug our shoulders and say, well, there'll be unitary councils ahead of us and we can just get ourselves through, because we have a responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, to ensure that we pass on a sustainable budget and a sustainable organisation to whatever succeeds us in terms of those new councils. So not only is it our professional but also our moral job to ensure that that happens. So there are difficult decisions ahead. We will continue to work as hard as we possibly can, remembering that it is those most vulnerable people, it is the children who are under threat. It is the vulnerable adults who require our support. It is those with disabilities. It is those older people in our community who need our support to help them live independently for as long as they possibly can, and then to support them if they are no longer able to do so. And it is the children with special educational needs that we need to accommodate and support and educate in environments that they find safe and welcoming. That is what we will continue to do, and we will do it to both the good and outstanding levels that we have always done. But that comes at a cost, and it comes at a cost to all of us, and we should have no doubt that the point will come where we will need to balance the amount that we need to ask our residents to pay, or we need to find ways of doing things that may be less comprehensive as those that we do now. But the recommendations that we have now are part of the new papers that Rob has very kindly put forward to us. They run from points 1 to 7, and then the recommendation to County Council that Marie's very kindly been running through on the screen for us all is there. Can I check that you're happy to approve those? Agreed. Okay. And so the recommendation, just to confirm to County Council, is that the council tax will increase by 4.995% for Hampshire residents in 25-26, and that there will be no recommendation that there should be a referendum for a higher amount. Okay. Rob, thank you very much. You've got one more paper, I think, for us, which is the capital programme 25-26 to 27-28.
Thank you, Leader. Last one, nothing to add to the report other than to say after 14 years I finally managed to get the capital programme presented in a cash rather than a starts basis, so I go out on a high note, but happy to take any questions.
Questions for Rob? We kind of covered off the capital conversation as part of that last conversation. Select committee chairs? Anything like to add? No. I've got something to add. There'll be a longer version, I'm sure, at the council, but this is Rob's last budget setting cabinet, and he has, as he has said, managed to have a cash version of the capital programme installed. So it's his legacy for Andy and for all of us going forwards. Rob, I've only been leader a year, and there are many people around this table who have been members of this council much longer. But throughout that time, you have provided us with excellent advice, and you have been a friendly and listening source of support to all of us politicians who sometimes may not have completely understood the financial stuff that you're explaining to us. And so your patience in going over it yet another time for each of us has been very much appreciated. So thank you so much for all you've done. We wish you a very happy retirement and a well-deserved one. Not quite there yet. You've got another few weeks to go, but this will be your last cabinet. So thank you so much for all you've done. We have, sorry, let me check. Anything on capital, everybody? Yeah, I think he does. Any other comments? All okay? So we're happy with the capital programme 25-26 to 27-28. I think the important thing is to say that we're still doing good things for the people of Hampshire, and we still have capital reserves that enable us to do work which firstly reduces the revenue pressures by being able to provide children's homes that we control ourselves, to provide increases in special educational need provision in local schools that reduces that pressure on home to school transport that you were describing, but also means that children don't have the stress of having to travel quite so far to school, and indeed helps us with building new schools and new nursing home facilities throughout the county. I'm happy to recommend that we accept that. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, that's the end of our meeting. Thank you to everybody for your patience in bearing with us through that hiatus in the middle. We will take all of these proposals forward to the full County Council meeting, which is a week on Thursday on February the 13th. Okay. We'll stop the webcast.